Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Jedrick Wills has had a very strange career. It's been from the beginning of his career to now. And each year that goes on, it gets stranger and stranger and stranger. And the piece of news that was just dropped about Jedrick Wills, I think might be the strangest piece of news that is dropped about him just yet. And that piece of news is that Jed Wills is willing to sit out most this season. Keep in mind, Jedrick Wills is not signed with a team right now. He has no football team right now, but he is willing to sit out the rest of this season in order to get healthy. So it seems like, at least this is the perception from the outside looking in, it could be wrong, that Jedrick Wills is not even seeking employment at this time. This is the former 10th pick of the draft. And what makes this strange, right, isn't just that Jed is a former 10th pick of the draft, isn't that Jed is a 10th pick of the draft that has not worked out. Unfortunately, for many teams, that has happened before, including the Cleveland Browns, but not limited to the Cleveland Browns. What makes this strange is the overall trajectory of Jed Wills' career. Like, if we go back, and it's easy to forget, there was a point in time where Jed was like good. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't a Pro Bowl level tackle, but he did show enough in his first 2 years that I thought it was a reasonable assumption. So did many other people who studied offensive line more than me, thought it was a reasonable expectation that Jed Wills would at least age into a veteran starting tackle. Maybe he's not a Pro Bowl guy, but he'd be there for the next 8 years, and that's kind of fine. But something happened to Jed Wills after the 2022 season. Something happened. Like, he had that 2022 season, and it's just been straight downhill 2023 and 2024. I don't know what went down with Jed Wills at that point, and it is shocking to remember just how highly he was regarded. Like, let's go back to, he was the 2020 draft, right? Let's go back to Pro Football Focus 2020 draft, right? When they gave grades out for these teams, and they were also ranking for these teams, well, for these positions. Jed was one of the highest ranked like prospects of that class. And it just goes to show you the inexact science that the draft is, right? Nobody would have thought coming out that Jed Wills would have the reputation that he ended up having coming out of college. Like, the reputation that Jed Wills has is one that gets worse every day. He's actively making decisions right now that I believe will make this even worse going forward for him, right? And there seems to be no end in sight for any of this, right? And that's what surprises me, is just like how nonstop this stuff was, right? He coming out, Pro Football Focus had him as the 11th overall player on the board. The Browns took him at 10. He was their third offensive tackle ranked. He drew comparisons to Lane Johnson. This is somebody who had immense potential at the position. I remember bringing on Vach Lombardi. Vach is one of the best at evaluating guys, especially in the trenches, but at other positions as well. Vach is a really good analyst, right? You can go watch Vach Lombardi's stuff. I've had Vach Lombardi on this channel before. I remember talking to Vach, and he was convinced that Jed Wills was like the best tackle in that class based off the tape. And I tend to think that the tape was probably really good for Jed at that time, right? And for him to turn into what he's turned into, where it's not just that the tape is bad for Jed Wills, it's that people have questioned his heart. And he seems to have no, like, real, I don't know. I don't want to judge too much about what's in that man's heart, right? Because I feel like people go that far with it all the time with Jed. And I do feel like on some level, that is inappropriate, right? I don't want to go question what's in somebody's spirit. I don't know that man for real, right? I don't spend any time with that man. I've never met that person. So, like, I can't tell you what's in that man's heart. But what I can tell you is what this looks like from the outside looking in, which is Jed Wills, who his whole time in Cleveland, effort has been a question about him, right? Sometimes justifiably so, right? We've all seen the clips on the internet. Other times, I feel like people nitpicked, especially early in Jed Wills' career, about finding these parts where he just didn't look too engaged, right? And I think people started jumping more and more on that. Jed Wills started to have more and more of a reaction to that. And then it kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy for Jed because he really didn't have these motor issues his first year in the league. And they popped up slightly. I thought for the most part, when people were bringing this stuff up in 2021, it was just about frustration about the team in general, that people were just focusing on Jed Wills because they didn't want to focus it on other players at that time. But then, like, at some point, he started to just be the meme, right? Or at least from the outside looking in, it seems like he just decided, you know what, if they think I'm lazy, I'm gonna show them what lazy looks like. Because then, like, the amount of instances where it looked like Jed Wills didn't give a damn just start to explode after that 2022 season. And then you get the whole situation last year where Jed is injured, and maybe we find out that there is more justifying where Jed Wills is in the future than what it looks like right now, right? Maybe we find out in the future that the Cleveland Browns were responsible for messing up Jed Wills' knee and misdiagnosing it. It wouldn't be a huge surprise to find out that the Cleveland Browns medical staff did not handle his knee injury correctly, because it wouldn't be the first knee injury that the Browns have not handled correctly this current run of them. I think that's why a lot of people are really critical of the training staff at this point. And we could look at the Deshaun Watson shouldergate situation. There's been a lot of weird situations with injuries over the last few years with the Cleveland Browns that, you know, logically speaking, I think it's fair to trace that back to something going on within the medical staff, not being too specific there, but it feels like something's going on. So I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that, like, okay, Jed had more going on with this knee than the team was willing to admit, and the team was in a wrong in a way that we didn't anticipate, and maybe that led to Jed having the attitude and the distrust that he has right now. Because now we're at a place where Jed basically told everybody, I ain't coming back during the season, right? He basically, and how it was portrayed, I don't know what his intent was. Again, I don't know Jed Wills, right? I have to know Jed Wills to know what his intent was. I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is how it came off to a lot of people, including myself, and how Jed Wills' speech at the end of the season came off was that he quit. He was like, you know what? I'm tired of being overly criticized. I'm tired of people not accounting for me being injured. So I'm not going to play unless I'm completely healthy, right? That's what it seems like Jed Wills was saying in that piece that he dropped at the end of the season, explaining why he didn't play. And that's already a bad kind of look for an offensive lineman, especially, right? Some positions, teams, if you're good enough, will give you the leeway to say, okay, well, if he's not 100%, then he's not going to play, especially like you play like a skill position like wide receiver, right? Where you're not going to be very useful unless you're at 100%. But offensive line is not one of those positions where you're expected to only play when you're 100%. You're expected to play when you're at 80%, 40%, sometimes 50%. Like, if you're not healthy, it's really not the main reason you can't, like, you have to not be able to play to be out as a tackle. And that's what people expect, especially in Cleveland when they just watched Joe Thomas, basically play a decade straight. Some of the worst teams you ever seen for. True professionalism, right? And it seems like the follow-up to Joe Thomas has been almost the opposite of Joe Thomas in terms of handling that. Now, again, this might be more of the fault of the Cleveland Browns, right, than we realize. We might get a report talking about how the Browns medical staff mismanaged an injury, and I can understand why Jed Wills would not want to come back early. Now, this move I don't really understand, which is he's already at a tough place. Teams already think that he quit on the Cleveland Browns, or at least there is a perception out there that he just kind of quit in the middle of the year. And then basically in the middle of free agency saying, hey, man, I'm not going to play most this year. I'm going to be out. I'm going to sit out and wait till I'm healthy to play. I don't know if that sends the greatest message in the world. Like, I don't know anybody who's looking at that and deciding, hey, man, let's sign me up for that at left tackle. And it's crazy because like 2 years ago, I would legitimately make the argument, I think I was right at the time, that, 2022, 21, 2020, that version of Jed Wills is good enough left tackle to start for a while. And then these last 2 years, he's just fallen off. His level of play has gotten worse. I mean, he's gotten just straight up like he just doesn't care. And I thought personally, maybe this was just Jed Wills showing that he can't play on a bad team. I didn't think it was about his overall relationship about football. I thought maybe this was just, hey, he's one of those dudes who, if the team's not good, he's not going to be motivated. Because it seems like that dip in play happened right when the team stopped playing good. And like even in 2023, his best play came after the Browns went on a win streak. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe Jed just needs to be on a good team. So you would think once he hits free agency, he's eager to just get a prove-it deal and show folks that he can contribute to a good team. But now he's just sitting here saying, I'm going to wait a whole nother year. Ironically, I don't know how anybody on this Cleveland Browns team, by the way, looks at what happened to Deshaun Watson after he sat out for 2 years and thinks to themselves, yeah, man, let me sit out a year of football. That's not going to damage me at all. I don't know how anybody does that, right? This Cleveland Browns, like even Nick Chubb, right, who sat out over a year for an injury, obviously trying to come back from it. He came back and it was like, oh, wow. Wow, like this whole not playing thing, this affects you greatly. I don't know how anybody plays on this Cleveland Browns team in this time period and comes away with like the idea of like, okay, well, me missing a year ain't going to be that big of a deal. I would be more cautious based on what I've seen of these players who take these hiatuses and then come back. Now, it might be different because like what? I think Trent Williams came back after like 2 years and it was fine, but Jed Wills ain't no Trent, right? Like that ain't going to happen, right? So, yeah, this is a strange update for Jed Wills. I don't really know what to do with him. He's not coming back to Cleveland. That part's obvious, right? The question is is he going to stay in the league? And honestly, I would ask the second question is like, hey, man, how much does Jed Wills want to stay in the league? And again, I don't want to question what his motives are, what his intent is, but I do have the right to look at this situation, see how it looks from the outside looking in and say what it looks like. And what it looks like is a dude who don't want to play football no more. Because none of these moves are adjacent with really wanting to play football. Unless this injury that he has is much worse than we think, unless the Cleveland Browns completely bobbled his injury and botched his injury in a massive way, then everything that we have seen just feels like a guy who don't want to play football that bad. And that's fascinating because you would think somebody who doesn't like to play football wouldn't go to Alabama. That's really hard in Alabama. But, hey, goes to tell you, this is why drafting is a crapshoot. You never know what's going to pop up down the line. Jed Wills, he wasn't the greatest tackle prospect to come out, but boy, there were a lot of really well-respected folk who do this for a living, who are really good at it, who looked at Jed Wills and thought they saw a stud. And then Jed Wills then turned out to be a stud. And that's why the draft is not an exact science. right? That's why you can't count your eggs before they hatch when it comes to the draft, right? We could be all excited. Oh, look at this egg. I like this egg. I like where we found this egg. Or, but you can't count these eggs as hatched until they hatch, right? And Jed Wills is a perfect example because nobody was questioning the Browns drafting Jed Wills 10th overall when they did it. Pro Football Focus gave this draft grade A. Everybody gave this draft grade A. We were all celebrating the selection after the draft. We were all giving the Browns high grades after the draft for the Jed Wills selection. And ended up, being the worst pick out of that draft. And if you would have transported back to 2020 and said that to somebody, I don't think people would have really believed you. Not to say that Jed was can't miss, but Jed felt like a sure thing at that time to at least be decent, especially after this first year where it seemed obvious he was going to be decent. But hey, can't count your eggs before they hatch. And sometimes it takes longer for these eggs to hatch than you would think. Sometimes you count them as hatching, they ain't really hatched yet. It's wild. Well, maybe you can't count your chickens until they leave the nest. How about that? Is that better? Or your birds before they leave the nest? Because Jed did hatch. He never left the nest. Maybe that's the better analogy. Y'all let me know in the comment section below. But yeah, this Jed Wills thing is just fascinating to me. The turn that it's taken over the last couple of years, and like Jed Wills' dedication, or at least apparent dedication, to making this situation look worse for him. Maybe it works out for him, right? Maybe he gets healthy, comes back, plays, gets really good, shows the world what he's capable of. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he's had some lingering issues. This has been bothering him for a while that he feels like he can't deal with. But the thing about playing left tackle in the NFL is that's part of the job, right? If you can't play well with injuries, then you're not a really good left tackle because you got to learn how to play with injuries because that's just part of the expectation is that you play through injuries as a left tackle. It's just what it is. So even if the excuse is he wasn't healthy, he needs to be healthy. The reality is that Jed needs to be able to play well when he's not healthy. So making this move just seems fascinating. Maybe he's just trying to save face because nobody wants to sign him. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is saving face at all. The only person this is making feel better is maybe Jed Wills for 30 minutes. Maybe it saves his pride for like 10 minutes. But reality is going to creep in sooner than later if that was the case for this. Either way, it's a real bad look. Y'all let me know what you think in the comment section below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.